Hey everyone, I'm Mr. Skeleton. Today we've got 10 true scary stories about December snowstorms. But before we start, please make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel, and you can change your mind later. And if you've got any ideas for what the next video should be, feel free to drop them down in the comments. I was the last one still out that night, and the roads were a mess. Visibility had tanked to the point I could barely see beyond the hood of the truck. The dispatcher sounded off. Not panicked exactly, just hesitant. She said a woman had called in from a place off Route 71. Supposedly a car had stalled near her property. She said there was a toddler inside, alone. No license plate, no make or model. It was weird from the start. The signal had cut out halfway through the call. The line just dropped. She hadn't called back. There wasn't even a solid ping on the GPS, just a rough location that put it somewhere near a long abandoned stretch of farmland out past the turnoff. I should have passed it on, let someone check in the morning. But I was the only one out with chains and four-wheel drive, and I figured if there really was a kid in that car, I couldn't ignore it, so I told dispatch I'd go. Took me a while to find the drive. There weren't any markers left, just a break in the trees and some half-buried old fence posts, the kind you'd miss unless you were looking for them. The drive itself hadn't been plowed in who knows how long. I made it halfway in before something hard and metal caught the bottom of the plow and jolted the whole truck. Nearly took my teeth out. I left the hazards flashing and got out. The snow was up to mid-calf and heavy. It stuck to everything. My boots, the back of my legs, even the inside of my coat collar. I was expecting to see at least some kind of tracks, maybe tire ruts or footprints, if someone had come out on foot. But the snow was perfectly smooth, undisturbed, not a single mark in either direction. Still, I kept walking. Eventually the house came into view. Just a faint shape at first through the falling snow. Big, old, looked like one of those turn-of-the-century farmhouses that no one had taken care of in years. One side of the roof sagged. The porch was half collapsed. But just before I hit the bend in the driveway, I saw the car. Mid-sized sedan, lights on, engine running, parked at a strange angle like it had tried to reverse into the trees and given up. The windows were totally fogged over, but I could see someone in the front seat. Just a shape, no movement. I knocked on the driver's side window. Nothing. The figure didn't respond, didn't turn, just sat there. I moved to the passenger side and tried the handle. It opened right up. A wave of heat hit me in the face, thick and stale. But there was something else mixed in. The smell. It was sharp and metallic, like damp wool left sitting in a tin can. The kind of smell that settles into your throat and doesn't let go. Inside, the woman was staring straight ahead. Her hands were locked on the steering wheel like she was bracing for something. A small child was asleep on her lap, face turned in toward her chest. The inside of the windshield was covered in streaks. Not frost, not moisture. It looked like someone had run dirty fingers all over it, tracing random patterns and smears. I asked if she was okay. She didn't jump or startle, just slowly turned her head toward me. Her expression was calm, almost content. She said, he didn't want to stay in the house anymore. I asked if she was the one who called for help. She shook her head once. The kid stirred a little. She brushed his hair back, real gentle, and said, he doesn't like snow. It makes him remember. By then, the snow was falling even harder. My shoulders were soaked through. I told her we could get them both somewhere warm, maybe back to the truck. She kept looking past me like I wasn't even there. Then, just above a whisper, she said, you're not supposed to be here yet. I tried calling back to dispatch. Static. I moved my position, angled the antenna, even walked a few steps toward the tree line. Still nothing but static. I asked again if she'd come with me, but she didn't answer. Just held on to the child a little tighter. I remember thinking the kid didn't look right. His skin was pale, not winter pale, but washed out, off color, like he hadn't been in the sun in a long time. Then she said, they're watching you. I turned. The house was completely dark. No porch lights, no windows lit up, no movement. But it hit me in the gut, that feeling. The one you get when someone's standing behind you in a room and you didn't hear them come in. The sense that something is there, even if your eyes say otherwise. I turned back to her, asked if someone was in the house. She said, "They always watch when someone new arrives." I considered walking back, maybe calling in a full crew, letting someone else sort this out. But then the kid twitched, not rolled over or yawned. His spine arched like something pulled it back. His arms shot out, fingers flexed. Then he dropped limp again. The woman didn't move. I leaned in, and that's when she made this sound, low, tense, like a breath caught halfway up her throat. Her whole body went stiff, and her lips parted like she was gritting her teeth. The kid made a noise too, kind of a choked whimper, like something being squeezed. I said I was taking the kid. Her head turned slowly toward me, too slowly. The kind of slow that feels deliberate, like she was trying to remember how people are supposed to move. She didn't argue, didn't fight, but her hands were still locked around him. I had to peel each finger off, one by one. Her grip was stronger than it should have been for someone that still. As I lifted him out of her lap, I saw something in the windshield. The words were traced into the inside of the fog glass. "H.E. is mine." I backed out of the car with the kid in my arms. The moment I turned around, the engine died. Lights off. Heat gone. Total silence. I turned back. She was gone. No sound. No footprints. No movement. The driver's seat was empty, like she'd never been there. But the child was still breathing in my arms, light and steady. Back at the truck, I set him in the passenger seat, wrapped a blanket around him. His eyes fluttered open, and he said, clear as day, "I told her you'd come instead." I looked down the driveway. All I saw was snow. The EMTs didn't reach us until almost midnight. 2 hours of nothing but snow and static. When they arrived, I handed the kid over. He watched me as they loaded him into the ambulance. We never found the car. No reports of a missing vehicle. No trace on the number that called. And the house? Turns out it had been abandoned for nearly a decade. Buyer took out most of the back structure in 2013. I've worked road maintenance for most of my adult life, about 12 years now. And honestly, it's not the kind of job you expect stories from. It's early mornings, long stretches of road, and dealing with whatever weather the state decides to throw at you. The town I was based in, Harlow Glen, sat tucked into a patch of upstate New York that felt forgotten by the rest of the map. Just pine and snow and not much else. We were a small team, 4 of us total, covering a whole network of rural highway running between a bunch of low-population towns that mostly kept to themselves. My stretch included the 26 miles between Brindle Hollow and Lake Renshaw. Beautiful in summer, a complete nightmare by December, especially with lake-effect snow. You'd swear the weather had a personal grudge against our section of road some days. That week before Christmas was rough. One storm after another with barely any let-up between them. On the day it happened, the snow had already been coming down for hours. Big gusts sweeping in sideways, visibility dropping fast. We'd had to pull the plows off the road because conditions got too rough for them to safely run. When the plows bail, you know it's bad. Around 9 that night, dispatch radioed in. Said they got a call from someone who lived near Rowan Spur Road. Apparently, there was a truck parked in one of the trailhead pull-offs, lights off, engine quiet, hadn't moved in over an hour. The caller also mentioned hearing a single loud bang echo off the hills. Not multiple bangs. Not a crash. Just one sharp noise out of nowhere with no follow-up. I remember raising an eyebrow at the radio. Could have been anything. A fallen branch, hunters doing something dumb, even ice cracking off trees. But I was already out checking for low visibility signs, and I wasn't far from that pull-off. So I headed over. The road there was blank. Just solid white, no tracks except my own weaving slowly through the drifts. The storm made it hard to see more than 10 feet in front of me. Even with the high beams on, it was like trying to look through a lit-up sheet of paper. Everything bounced light right back at me. The pull-off itself was an old semicircle of gravel carved into the edge of the woods, mainly used in summer by hikers starting up into the preserve. In winter, it turned into a snow collection basin. When I turned in, the tires dipped hard into packed snow, and I felt the truck shift under me a little. The whole space looked untouched, just a quiet white scoop under trees weighed heavy with ice, except for the truck. It was an older model pickup, parked under the wooden shelter where the trail map usually sat, dark maroon with the back half already buried in snow. It looked like it had been sitting there a while, which immediately felt off. People don't just abandon their vehicles in storms like that, not out here. And if they do, they usually leave a note on the dash or call it in. I pulled up behind it, engine running, and stepped out. The wind hit like a slap, sharp, needling cold that found every gap in my gear. I zipped my jacket all the way up and started toward the driver's side door. My boots sank in past the ankle with each step, the snow making that tight squeaking sound with every footfall. I knocked on the window, muffled thud. "Hey," I called. "Everything okay in there?" Nothing. No shift of movement. No flicker of light. Just the storm pressing in. I tried the handle. The door opened without resistance. That's when I saw the shotgun. It was lying across the man's lap, stock against his hip, barrel angled slightly up. His right hand touched it lightly, not gripping, just resting there, like he'd forgotten it was in his hand. He was slumped forward a bit, not dramatically, just enough that I couldn't see his face. I froze, stepped back without thinking, putting distance between me and the open cab. I don't scare easily, but there was a stillness to the scene that made everything in my chest tighten. I went around the front of the truck, roots crunching with more urgency now, and shone my flashlight through the passenger side window. That's when I saw it. There was no face. The blast had been close range. The damage went upward, not backward. The top of his head was gone, but his body hadn't moved much. He still sat upright, like he'd just stayed. Even in death, the seatbelt wasn't on. Nothing was braced. He hadn't slumped sideways or collapsed into the wheel, just sat there frozen in posture, like something had kept him upright. And then I noticed the snow. Snowflakes were drifting into the cab. Not from an open door. This was before I'd opened anything on that side, but from above, from somewhere inside. I tilted my flashlight upward. The wooden shelter over the truck had a section blown out directly above the cab. A wide panel of the roof had been torn open, not splintered like a fallen branch would do, not peeled back like something heavy had fallen through. No, this was a jagged-edged rupture forced from inside the truck and punched up through solid timber. Clean-edged holes, several of them, letting the snow filter straight through. The blast had gone upward and torn through the shelter roof. I stood there longer than I should have. My breath fogged in my mask, and I became sharply aware of how quiet everything felt. The storm still howled through the trees, but under that wooden roof, it felt like the volume had been turned down. The snow was falling in absolute silence inside the cab, landing on his shoulder, melting against the dashboard. His phone was in the cup holder, unlocked. Screen off. No signs of a message. No missed calls. No music playing. No heater on, just off. That's the part that stuck with me. No sign of movement. No sign of anything done in a panic. It didn't feel like a moment of crisis. It felt like a decision made a long time ago, followed through on with methodical calm. Eventually, I walked back to my truck, sat inside for maybe a minute before I keyed the radio. When I spoke, my voice sounded strange in the cab, too loud, too human for how quiet everything outside had become. It was like breaking a seal on something. The deputy showed up after about 30 minutes. Then the coroner. Then a tow unit with snow chains that squealed like animals in the cold. I gave my statement, brief, factual, answered the questions I had to answer. No one asked me how long I stood there before calling it in. I didn't offer it. I also didn't mention the snow falling inside the cab before I opened the door. I didn't mention the way it felt under the shelter, that frozen stillness, like something had paused the world and left it on mute. I kept that part for myself. They identified the man. Local, from Larnett Creek. Worked at the warehouse off Tennyson Road. No priors. No known issues. Family said he'd been normal the last time they saw him. Holidays coming up. Nothing unusual. The kind of guy no one expects to do something like that. But he had. Clean, quiet, final. Afterward, they repaired the shelter roof. You could tell it was new woodlighter color, smoother grain, but they didn't bother to match the stain. If you knew what to look for, you could still see the shape of the rupture. It sat just above where the cab had been, a faint geometric scar in the rebuilt roof. I still drive past that trailhead once or twice a week, but I never stop. My niece Clara was staying with me the week before Christmas. Her parents, my sister and her husband, had gone to Arizona for some winter sunshine, and I offered to keep Clara with me in Vermont so she wouldn't miss school. She was 6, bright as anything, and full of energy that somehow never ran out. I lived just a block from her elementary school, so it all made sense. And to be honest, I liked having her around. I don't have kids of my own, and Clara always gravitated toward me more than anyone else. That Friday was supposed to be a big one. The town had planned its annual tree lighting in the park, with carolers, cocoa, even a guy in a beard who passed for Santa if you squinted a bit. Clara had been talking about it all week, but around 3 that afternoon, the snow started coming down hard, big, heavy flakes that didn't mess around. By 4, the roads were already mush, and at 5, they officially canceled the event. I told Clara as gently as I could, and she tried to be a good sport about it, but I could tell she was crushed. So I improvised. There's this little church lot a few blocks from my place that sells last-minute Christmas trees every year. It's nothing fancy, just a patch of cleared ground with a bunch of trees leaned up in crooked rows and a few floodlights strung from poles. Still, I figured it was something. Told Clara we'd go and pick one out ourselves, just the 2 of us, make our own little celebration out of it. We bundled up in hats and boots and made the walk, probably 4 blocks, not even. The roads were mostly abandoned except for a few tire tracks, and the sidewalks hadn't been cleared yet, so we had to stomp through shin-deep snow. Clara didn't care. She charged ahead like it was an adventure, her little boots leaving neat prints behind. She'd stop now and then to flop into a snowbank or try catching flakes on her tongue. I let her get ahead a bit, kept calling out to her now and then just to keep us connected. Not out of worry, really. Just that instinct that kicks in when you're responsible for someone else's kid. When we got to the lot, there were maybe 2 other families poking around. The whole place smelled like pine and gasoline from the generator chugging in the corner. The lights overhead flickered now and then, but did their job. Clara lit up the second we stepped through the gate. She was darting between rows, calling out every tree she liked, which, to be fair, was about every 3rd one. I stayed within range, watching her bounce from one side to the other. She never went far. I think I even pulled out my phone to snap a few pictures of her footprints trailing through the snow between trees. It was one of those calm little moments that doesn't seem important until later, when you start replaying every second. Then I turned to the guy manning the checkout table. A shed, really, made of plywood and optimism. He looked like he was in his 30s, maybe early 40s, heavy-set, bearded. He nodded at me and asked if I needed help. I said we were just browsing, and we made some small talk about prices, the snow, whatever. It couldn't have been more than 15-20 seconds. When I looked back, Clara was gone, not wandering off, not hidden behind a tree. Just gone. I didn't process it at first. I called her name once, twice. Then I started walking faster down the row she'd just been in, thinking maybe she'd looped around. But there was nothing. Just that empty space between trees and swirling snow beyond it. Then I saw the footprints. Hers, small, skipping, playful, and next to them, deeper ones, bigger, adult-sized. Their pattern was different, more deliberate. Both sets headed in the same direction, out of the lot and toward the sidewalk. I followed them until they got muddled in the tire tracks at the curb, where the snow had been mashed and churned up by passing cars. After that, I couldn't make out where they went. I looked up, scanned the street, and then I saw them. Across the intersection, under the streetlight, This man, tall, thick coat, hood pulled low. Clara was beside him, not held, but close. His arm was down, but I could see that he had her by the wrist, just low enough that it wouldn't look odd unless you knew what to look for. From a distance, it could have passed as normal, a dad and daughter crossing the street, but it wasn't. I yelled, "Clara." She snapped her head around so fast, I saw her hood slip back a bit. She saw me, stopped walking. The man stopped too. I kept yelling, "Clara, come here, let go of him." She didn't move at first. Neither did he. He just stood there, looking at me. I was close enough now to see his face. Pale, patchy beard, mid-40s maybe, not angry. Not panicked. Just blank, like he was looking through me. That's the part that gets me. How calm he was. Like none of this was unexpected. Clara started tugging her arm. Tiny movements at first, then more forceful. I kept moving, fast as I could without falling, arms out like I could somehow scoop her up from 10 feet away. When I got within 5 feet, she yanked herself free and bolted toward me. I dropped to my knees in the snow to catch her. She practically crashed into me. I wrapped her up, held her so tight I think I startled her. She was trembling, couldn't even speak. Her mittens were damp and her cheeks were raw from the cold. I turned to look, but the man was already walking away. Not running, not looking back, just walking toward the opposite sidewalk like he had all the time in the world. Then I noticed the second man. He'd been behind the bus shelter, out of sight. I hadn't seen him at all until that moment. He stepped out as the first guy passed him. No conversation, no handoff. Just a quiet turn and walk. Both of them heading down the street side by side like it was nothing. That shook me in a different way, because that meant it had been planned, not a random grab, not a spur-of-the-moment thing. I picked Clara up and half carried her back to the tree lot. The guy from the shed came out, confused, asking what was going on. He hadn't seen anything. I was already dialing the police, my hands so cold I kept fumbling the screen. The officers came quick, took statements. Clara finally found her voice again, told them the man had said he needed help finding his dog, that's all. She said she believed him until he took her wrist, and then, this part stuck with me, she said, I didn't like how his eyes looked. The officers took that pretty seriously. One of them told me something that's burned into my brain ever since. He said it lined up with a pattern they'd been hearing about. 2 men working together. One approaches. The other waits nearby. If someone notices and calls it out, the first guy just walks. Maybe even acts confused. But if nobody says anything, the second man is ready to go. Different height, different build, different car, if there's one nearby. So when it finally gets reported, all the witness details are scrambled. It's intentional. I couldn't shake that. Still can't. That was 2 years ago. Clara still flinches when it snows. Still avoids corners where she can't see ahead. I moved to a different neighborhood a few weeks after it happened. That winter, I stayed back in Bellevue while my parents flew out to Tucson to see my grandmother. They gave me the usual, "You sure?" a few times, but I told them it was fine. I'd just started working at this small, no-frills gas station off Route 49, and the owner, Frank, was in full panic mode about covering the holiday shifts. He made it sound like Christmas Eve at that place was going to be a war zone. The night the storm rolled in, I was closing solo. The radio had been chirping all day about a big whiteout hitting by midnight. But around 9 o'clock, it didn't seem too bad yet. Snow was steady but lazy. Thick flakes floating down like the sky couldn't be bothered to hurry. Wind hadn't picked up yet either. The roads were still drivable, though traffic had already thinned out to almost nothing. I'd just finished mopping up near the coffee station. Someone had spilled what looked like half a pot earlier and just walked away. And I was dragging the mop bucket back toward the stockroom when I saw headlights cut across the front window. They lit up the aisles for a second, then faded as the engine turned off. It was this old, dull gray sedan, Kinda boxy, like something from the early 90s. Looked out of place even in that lot, which isn't saying much. We mostly got rusty pickups and the occasional lost tourist. This car didn't look lost, just out of time. The guy who stepped out wasn't exactly dressed for the weather. Heavy dark coat, sure, but no gloves. No hat. It had to be single digits out. His hands were bare, red around the fingers, and he moved fast, ducking into the store like he was escaping something. He didn't say a word, just brushed some snow off his shoulders and made a beeline to the coolers in the back, stopped right in front of the sodas and stood there. I gave him the usual evening as I walked behind the counter. Nothing, not even a glance. He just stared at the glass door of the fridge like he'd never seen a bottle of Sprite before. He didn't open it, didn't even move, just stood there, like he was waiting for it to move first. I watched him for a second longer than I meant to. Something about the way he stood felt off, too still, like he practiced it, like he wanted someone to notice. I was halfway through deciding whether I should ask him if he needed help when he suddenly turned and started walking toward me, still empty-handed. He stopped at the counter, not close enough to lean on it, just close enough that I could see the raw skin around his knuckles, the way they looked like they'd been chapped for days. Then he said, "How long do you stay open?" His voice was flat, not unfriendly, just blank. I told him we closed at 11. "You're here alone?" And like an idiot, I said yes. It just came out. Reflex. I didn't think anything of it until a second later when his mouth twitched. Not a full smile, just a twitch. And he said, "Brave. Most people aren't, this far out." Then he turned and walked back outside. No purchase. No small talk. Just gone. I watched his taillights disappear down the road and immediately double-checked the locks. Not that it made me feel much better. By 10:15, the wind had picked up for real. The snow wasn't gentle anymore. It was coming in sideways, hammering the windows. I hadn't had another customer since Sedan Guy, so I figured no one else was showing up. I decided to close up a bit early, turned the open sign off, started counting the drawer. That's when I heard it. A faint sound coming from the back, not loud, not sudden, just this dull, repetitive tapping, like someone knocking slowly, not with a fist, with knuckles. We didn't use that door, ever. It was a heavy metal fire door chained from the inside. I hadn't touched it in weeks. I walked toward the stockroom trying to stay quiet, even though I wasn't sure why. The tapping stopped when I got a few feet away. I held my breath. Nothing. And then came the dragging. Long, slow, like something was being pulled across the wall just outside. It moved from the door to the left, toward the side of the building. I stood there listening, trying to tell myself it could be wind. Maybe a branch. Something reasonable, but it didn't sound like wind. I turned off the stockroom light and locked the door behind me, just in case. Then I called Frank, told him someone might be outside, maybe messing around. He told me to stay in, stay on the phone, and he called the sheriff. Not even 5 minutes later, the store phone rang. It nearly gave me a heart attack. I picked it up, thinking it was Frank again. There was no voice at first, just silence. The kind that makes you start to wonder if someone's breathing on the other end. Then, quietly, "You shouldn't have lied." I hung up. Tried calling Frank back. Got nothing. I texted him, "Did you just call?" and stared at the screen, waiting for the little dots to show up. Nothing. I stayed behind the counter, half hiding under the ledge, staring out at the front door. My fingers felt stiff. Not from the cold, from the way I was gripping my phone. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that none of this was proof of anything, but I couldn't get the voice out of my head. At 10:47, the front door opened. It wasn't locked. I know I locked it. I know I did. Same guy walked in. Coat still zipped. Snow clinging to his sleeves. His hands looked worse. Bright red, almost raw. He didn't speak at first. Just walked up to the same spot by the counter and stared at me. Then he said, "You're not supposed to be open." I said, "I'm closing now." He didn't blink. Didn't nod. Just tilted his head slightly. "Why'd you lie about being alone?" I said I hadn't. He shook his head. "Someone's in the back." My mouth went dry. I didn't say anything. He leaned in just a little and said, "Tell them they don't have long." Then he turned around and walked back outside. I reached under the counter and slammed the emergency button. Nothing happened. No buzz, no light, no signal that it had done anything. And then the lights went out, not flickering, just gone. The whole store went pitch black, except for the dim red EXIT sign. I grabbed my phone, no bars. Tried 911. The call didn't even try to go through. I rushed to the door to throw the deadbolt manually, and that's when I noticed something that still makes my stomach turn even now. There were no tracks in the snow. No tire marks, no footprints. Just smooth, powdery white, untouched in every direction. That sedan had been parked right there. I saw it drive off. I saw it come back. But the snow looked like no one had been near it in hours. And then the dragging started again, from behind the store. I ran back, relocked the stockroom door, dragged the shelving cart in front of it, and barricaded myself in the employee restroom. I turned on my flashlight and sat on the floor, knees to my chest, listening to every small noise. I stayed like that for hours. Sometimes the scraping would stop. Sometimes it would start again, closer. Once, I swear I heard something brush the outside wall right next to where I was sitting. Just a slow scrape, like nails or something harder. I must have passed out at some point. When I opened my eyes again, daylight was coming through the crack under the door. Then I heard pounding. On the front windows, it was a sheriff's deputy. He looked as relieved to see me as I felt to see him. Frank had tried to get through all night. When he couldn't, he drove to the station himself as soon as the storm eased up. They sent someone out right after that. The power had come back on while I was asleep. The store looked normal, quiet, ordinary, except the back door. It had fresh scratches, dozens, long ones, short ones, around the handle, around the hinges, deep gouges that hadn't been there before. Still no tracks in the snow, no tire marks, no prints, just that smooth, perfect white. I quit that morning, left Frank a voicemail. Didn't even bother grabbing my last check. I still don't know what that man was. But ever since that night, I don't stay alone anywhere after dark in December. I'd picked up this short-term security gig for some extra cash before the holidays. Northern Idaho, middle of nowhere, upscale cabin retreat. I just finished school, didn't really have a plan yet. The job was low pressure, just check-ins on the equipment, keeping an eye on weather updates, making sure nobody wandered off drunk into the forest. But that winter, brutal. The snow came early and didn't stop. A few days before Christmas, this huge storm rolled in heavy, wet snow, total whiteout conditions. Most of the full-time staff left early to avoid getting stuck up there. The site manager, Keith, called me from town that afternoon and asked if I could stay overnight at the main lodge and monitor the cameras, just until the storm blew over. Said I'd be alone except for one other temp, who was already assigned night patrol. I told him it was fine. I didn't have anywhere else to be. My apartment back in Nettlewood barely had working heat, and the lodge at least had a fireplace and stocked pantry. Sounded like a decent trade-off. The other temp was Darren. Quiet guy, late 20s maybe. We didn't know each other well, but he seemed like someone who kept to himself by default, not in a sketchy way. We ate together around 6 leftover pasta from the staff fridge, and then he went out to start his hourly loop around the property. I stayed in the lodge. There were monitors set up in the back room, all connected to motion sensor cameras posted around the cabins and trail. The system was basic but reliable. There was also a two-way radio, a backup generator, and a binder with emergency procedures no one had ever opened. By 8, the snow was thick enough that you couldn't see more than 20 feet past the windows. I figured Darren was doing what he was supposed to do, checking cabin doors, looking for signs of roof strain, logging snow buildup. I threw on my coat to salt the porch and almost wiped out immediately thick powder covering a sheet of ice. I scattered some salt, then ducked back inside. My cheeks were numb, and the fire had started to fade. I was stoking the flames when the radio clicked on. "Cabin 6's back door is open," Darren said. "Looks like it blew in." Cabin 6 was the farthest one from the lodge, tucked into the trees at the end of the property line. It was usually booked out, first people liked the extra privacy. I asked Darren if he wanted backup. He said no, he'd handle it. "I'll be quick," he added, and that was it. Didn't hear from him again. At first, I didn't think much of it. The snow made everything feel slower, quieter. I figured he'd gotten sidetracked or was waiting out the wind before heading back. But around 9:30, I noticed something weird with the camera system. The feeds froze. Not all at once, just gradually, one screen at a time. At first, I thought maybe the storm had fried the signal, but the power was still fine. Lights on, heat running, no flickers. I rebooted the system. Nothing. Tried manually cycling through the camera feeds. Most came up black. Cabin 6's feed flickered, then paused on a still image, a view of the hallway inside the cabin. The angle didn't show much, just part of the entry rug and the beginning of the hallway that led toward the bedrooms. It wasn't live, just a single frozen frame. I waited, watching the screen like it was going to suddenly start moving again. It didn't. I texted Darren, no response. Called, straight to voicemail. I kept telling myself the storm was just messing with reception. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. By 10, I gave up waiting. I grabbed the site's spare flashlight, pulled on my heavy coat and boots, and started the hike toward Cabin 6. It was worse than I expected. Snow past my knees, blowing sideways, biting through my gloves. I had to walk with my head down and one hand over my face just to see. The trail had already disappeared, and every step felt like wading through wet concrete. The flashlight barely helped. It just bounced off the snow in dull, fuzzy halos. When I got to Cabin 6, the back door was still open, blown wide, banging lightly against the frame like it hadn't been touched since Darren radioed. I stepped inside. The heat wasn't working. It felt colder inside than it did outside. The flashlight beam caught melting slush just inside the doorway and a line of boot prints leading down the hall. Darren's probably. But something about them didn't sit right. There was a second set of prints, smaller. Not kid-sized, just off. Narrower, with a weird angle to the toe. They veered off toward one of the bedrooms. I followed Darren's tracks instead. They stopped at the bathroom. His jacket was on the floor, so was his radio. Just lying there, like he'd taken them off on purpose. The bathroom light was on and the door was shut. I knocked. "Darren?" Nothing. I opened the door. Nobody inside. The room looked clean, untouched. Steam-free mirror, no sign of a struggle. But there was this little portable space heater running in the corner, humming softly, and Darren's phone was sitting on the edge of the sink, screen still on. There was a single message on it, from a number with no name. Just said, "Look up." I didn't want to, but I did. The flashlight hit the ceiling, and there it was. An old square vent. Wide, dark, open. The kind you only see in buildings from 50 years ago, before they started using narrow ductwork. I hadn't seen one like that in years. And just for a second, I felt it. This soft, warm breath of air coming down. Not a draft, not heat from the vent. Just this presence, like someone exhaling, slow and close. I bolted. Didn't close the bathroom door. Didn't shut the cabin door behind me. I just ran, slipped on the porch step and hit my shoulder hard on the way down, but I kept going. Back through the snow, flashlight swinging, lungs burning. Back at the lodge, I locked every door. Checked the windows twice. Tried the radio again, still dead. Picked up the landline. Nothing. No dial tone. Just that dead, hollow silence. At 11 on the dot, the camera feed came back. Cabin 6's hallway was on screen again. This time, the door was closed. The still image was gone. It was live. I stared at the screen. Nothing happened for a solid minute. Then someone walked across the hallway. Fast. No face, no details, just a shape and a dark coat. It wasn't Darren. Wrong build. Different coat. quicker steps. That was enough for me. There was an old snowmobile locked in the tool shed, reserved for emergencies. I'd never used it before, barely even touched it. But I got it running. Don't ask me how, and drove it blind through 5 miles of powder and wind until I reached the ranger station. Didn't stop until I was inside the emergency trailer with the lock clicked shut behind me. The rescue crew went back up the mountain the next morning. They found Darren. He was face down in the snow behind cabin 4, frostbitten but alive. Barely. He didn't remember anything after stepping into cabin 6. The last thing he recalled was hearing something in the vents. He thought it was a voice, whispering. That's it. I quit the next day. Told Keith I was done and left town by sunset. It started snowing around mid-afternoon, maybe 3 or so, and by the time the sun dipped behind the ridge, the town was already half shut down. My supervisor texted around 6 to cancel the evening shift, but I'd already offered to check the off-site lodge we used for storing overflow gear. Figured I'd just get it done and be back before the storm got worse. The lodge was less than a mile from my place, just a short walk through the woods on a trail I knew by heart. No street lights out there, just the usual pale glow from the snow when the sky was overcast. I'd walked that path plenty of times in worse conditions, usually with a thermos of coffee in one hand and a headlamp that barely worked. It wasn't a big deal. The trail cut through a dense stretch of pine and then opened into this flat clearing where the storage lodge sat. Not much to it. Single room, old wood construction, a backup generator out back. Inside, we had shelves full of off-season supplies, a few logs of training records, boxes of equipment, and a cot in the corner for emergencies. In theory, someone could ride out a night there if they had to. My checklist was simple. Confirm the generator was running, make sure no pipes had frozen, and find a box of performance gloves our instructors needed for the weekend ski lessons. That was it. The wind was already picking up by the time I reached the door. Not blizzard level, just that persistent sideways gust that slips through your sleeves and into your bones. I stamped the snow off my boots, unlatched the bolt, and stepped inside. Cold air, but not freezing. The lights worked. Generator was humming along, a steady thrum I could feel more than hear. I kept my coat on and headed straight to the back cabinets. Everything was still labeled, thankfully. The glove box was right where it should have been. Third shelf, left side. I pulled it down, set it on the table in the center of the room, and made a mental note to grab it the next morning with a sled or maybe one of the snowmobiles. While I was there, I ran the tap to make sure the pipes hadn't frozen. Water came out slow but steady. The heat tape wrapped around the plumbing was still drawing power. Everything seemed fine. I sat on the edge of the cot and took out my water bottle. Just needed a minute to regroup before heading back. That walk back uphill could be brutal in heavy snow. Then I saw the footprints. 6 of them, small. Not toddler small, but smaller than mine. Narrow, clean edges and the thin layer of dust that always settled on the floor. They weren't from me. I'd come in and walked a different line across the room. These led from the middle of the lodge straight toward the back wall. No window, no door. Just solid wood. I stood up slowly and followed them. My boots creaked against the floorboards. The prints stopped maybe a foot from the wall. No turning, no trail leading away. Just stopped. I crouched down and ran my fingers over one of them. Dry. No melt, no damp outline. Just a clear mark like someone had been standing there, then vanished. I stayed there for a moment, listening. My ears strained to pick up anything. Movement, breath, footsteps. But it was just the wind outside scraping the shutters. Nothing inside felt out of place. Still, I went back to the door and locked the bolt. I wasn't scared at that point, not exactly. Just alert. Something felt off, and I didn't like not having a reason. I pulled out my phone to snap a photo of the prints. Figured I'd show it to one of the guys on maintenance. Maybe someone had come by earlier and didn't log it. But when I lifted the phone and pointed it at the floor, the prints were gone. Just like that. Nothing. I walked over, squinting. Not even a smear. I looked at my own boots. Still wet, still leaving faint slush trails as I moved. But those other prints, gone like they'd never been there. I rubbed the back of my neck, told myself maybe I saw old marks, weird shadows. That kind of stuff can happen. Your brain fills in gaps. I reached for my water bottle, but it wasn't where I'd left it. Not on the crate by the wall, it was on the table, right next to the glove box. I stared at it for a second, then picked it up and took a drink. Still cold, still mine, no big deal. Probably moved it without realizing. Outside, the wind kicked up again, louder this time. It sounded more like a low moan than a gust. I told myself it was better to wait. Give it an hour, trail would settle. Less chance of slipping on the way back. I unzipped my coat halfway and pulled off my gloves. The lodge felt warmer than I expected, almost too warm. I walked over to the thermostat. It said 52 degrees. That wasn't right. The generator usually topped out around 45 in heavy snow. The insulation in there was old, and the wind liked to find every gap. I nudged it down a couple degrees just to test and held my hand near the vent. Still warm, too warm. I moved toward the corner where the heat duct ran through the wall, got closer. There was this faint scent of pine, not musty fresh, like someone had just cut into a tree. I touched the metal pipe, hot, that made no sense. Then I heard a creak behind me, not loud. Just a shift, like weight moving on old boards. I turned fast, nothing. But the table was empty. No glove box, no water bottle. I scanned the room. The box wasn't on the floor. The bottle wasn't tipped over. It was just gone. I crouched to check under the table. Nothing. When I stood back up, the crate I'd sat on had moved. It was now right in front of the door, and I hadn't heard it slide. I stepped around it and went to the bolt. That's when I saw the note, taped to the inside of the door. White, folded, clean tape, crisp edges. I peeled it off slowly, opened it. This is not when you are. The handwriting was sharp, neat, almost mechanical. I checked the ink with my thumb. It looked wet, but no smudge, dry. My phone said 9:27. I'd been inside for, 30 minutes? That note hadn't been there when I arrived. I folded it, tucked it into my pocket, and turned around. The glove box was back on the table. Water bottle too. Like nothing had moved. I didn't touch either. I backed up slowly and sat back down on the cot. Then the lights went out. No flicker, no buzz. Just off. I pulled out my phone and flipped on the flashlight. The beam barely reached the corners of the room. The wind outside sounded sharper now. Not louder exactly, just meaner, like it had weight. I aimed the light at the door. Another note. I hadn't heard anything. Not a step, not a whisper, just darkness. Then the note. This is not where you'll stay. Same handwriting, same strange wording, identical to the first. My flashlight flickered. I tapped it off and on. It held steady. But when I scanned the room again, the vent pipe was gone. Gone, no seam, no mark, just a smooth wall. I walked over, reached out, cold wood, solid. I backed away and tripped over the crate again, except now it was in the center of the room. I looked up. The door looked farther away. Same wall, same frame, just stretched. I checked the time. Still 9:27. I tried the door. Bolt slid. Handle turned, but the door wouldn't move. I spun, intending to crack a window, but there weren't any. They were just gone. Smooth logs all around. The cot was gone too. My flashlight swept the floor. There was a third note lying where the cot had been. You weren't supposed to come tonight. Red ink this time. I didn't fold it. I left it there and walked to the wall where the closet should have been. No door, no handle, just wood, just wood. I yelled, just noise. I needed to hear myself, no answer. Phone still said 9:27. Tried to power it off. Nothing. I turned toward the table again. The glove box was open. Inside were stacks of notes. Dozens, maybe hundreds, all with those same 3 phrases, filed like records. I didn't touch them, just backed toward the door. Closed my eyes. When I opened them, Everything was normal. Vent was there, windows were there, glove box untouched, cot in place. I tried the door, it opened. Outside, the snow had lightened. I walked straight home. Didn't stop until I saw my porch light glowing through the trees. The library was closing early because of the storm. I'd stayed behind after school to retake a history test, and by the time I stepped outside, it was already dark. Our town's not big, just one of those tucked away New England places where everyone knows who drives what, and most people don't lock their front doors unless it's tourist season. My dad's truck had refused to start that morning, dead battery or something, and he was already annoyed about it, so I didn't want to push my luck by asking for a ride. Figured I'd just walk. I'd done it before. It's about 2 miles from the school to our place if you cut down the right streets. So I zipped up my coat, wrapped my scarf around my face until it almost touched my eyes, and started walking. At first it was kind of peaceful. The snow covered up all the usual sounds. No traffic, no barking dogs, not even the buzz from the diner's old sign, just me and the crunch of my boots. It made everything feel sort of paused. I hit the hill past the post office and noticed a truck up ahead, parked halfway up the next block. The engine was still running, headlights casting this hazy glow through the falling snow. Looked like an old Ford. Mud-caked, dent in the bumper, tires sunk a little in the snow like it had been there a while. The angle was weird, half in the street, half turned toward the curb like whoever parked it didn't quite finish the job. As I walked past it, I peeked in. The windows were fogged up, but I could still make out a shape in the driver's seat, just sitting there, still. No movement, didn't feel threatening exactly, just off. People leave cars running during storms, sure, but they usually don't sit in them without doing anything. No phone light, no visible movement, nothing. I kept walking. Turned down the next street, past the old diner that's been boarded up since I was in middle school. That stretch is quiet in winter, creepy quiet. Most of the houses are empty by November, summer people with big wraparound porches and no idea how to drive in snow. There's a greenhouse too, but it shuts down for the season, and 2 houses that burned down last year still stand there. Blackened skeletons, no one's bothered to tear down. No lights, no signs of life. Just empty driveways and more snow. Maybe 10 minutes later I heard it. Just this faint shift of weight. The kind of sound that's easy to ignore if you're not already keyed up. Tires on snow. I turned around. The Ford was there again. Same one, no doubt. Maybe a block behind me now. Moving slow. Real slow. Like someone trying not to make noise. No other cars in sight. No fresh tire tracks besides mine and now his. Nobody else on the road. Just us. I stared at it for a second. Waited for it to pass. It didn't. It just kept crawling along, always about the same distance back. I turned back around and kept walking. A little faster this time. Told myself maybe he lived up the road. Or was lost. People drive weird in storms, right? Maybe he couldn't see well and was just being careful. I kept glancing back though, every few steps. And he was always there, never getting closer, never falling too far behind. The third time I looked, his headlights were off. That's when I stopped pretending it was normal. I cut into the woods. Wasn't my brightest idea, but at the time it made sense. I knew the trail. It runs behind a row of houses and eventually leads to the back of my neighbor's property. There's a little footbridge that crosses a frozen creek. I figured if I moved quick, I could lose him in the trees. So I ducked into the woods and started moving fast. Not full out running yet, but close. The trees closed in around me and the snow got deeper. My boots slipped a few times. Branches scratched my coat and yanked at my scarf. My breath was loud and hot inside the fabric. The woods were darker, the trail narrower. About halfway in, I heard it again. Another set of footsteps. Not mine. Slower. More deliberate. Somewhere behind me, a little to the left. And heavier. You can feel it in the snow, the way the ground compresses when someone's really putting weight down. This wasn't just someone out for a walk. I didn't look back. Didn't want to see. I veered off the path and started climbing toward the old water tower. The snow was deeper off trail, and I slipped twice. Hard. One time I landed on my hip and my teeth clacked together. My scarf caught on something, probably a branch, and I had to yank it free so hard it burned my neck. Still didn't look back. The water tower sits on a hill surrounded by a crumbling chain-link fence. There's a small utility shed next to it, probably full of old tools or electrical junk. I ducked behind the shed and pressed myself against the wall, trying to keep my breathing quiet. I waited. At first there was nothing, just the wind rattling through the branches above me and the pounding of my own heart. Then I heard it. Crunch, pause, crunch, footsteps. Slow, cautious, coming closer. They stopped just on the other side of the shed, maybe 10 feet away. And then I heard it, soft but unmistakable, the sound of something being unsnapped, like a buckle or strap being undone. I don't know what it was, but I wasn't about to stick around and find out. I took off, no more hiding. I pushed myself up and ran straight for the other side of the hill, heading toward the sledding slope across town. I could see faint glimmers through the trees, Christmas lights, porch lights, something, anything. I ran like my life depended on it. Fell again, this time on my knee. It sent a jolt up my leg that made me stumble, but I didn't stop. My gloves were soaked. My hands were stinging. My legs felt like they were turning to jelly, but I kept running. Finally broke through the tree line and saw the hill. A few houses dotted along the ridge. Some still had decorations blinking in the snow. I didn't care which house. I just sprinted toward the first one with lights on and pounded on the back door like I was trying to break it down. A woman answered, maybe in her 40s, bundled in a robe and thick socks. I didn't recognize her, and I must have looked like hell because she didn't ask a thing. Just opened the door and pulled me inside. I stood there in her kitchen, dripping onto the floor, still trying to catch my breath. She offered me tea, but I couldn't stop shaking long enough to hold the mug. I sat on her couch and stared at the wall until my mom got there. The snow had started falling just before 6. I'd gone out earlier to top off the gas tank and grab some snacks, figuring I might get snowed in for the night. By the time I got back, the county was already sending out those flashing alerts. Non-essential travel lockdown, all caps. They meant it. I was house-sitting for my cousin and his wife while they were visiting her parents in Ohio for the week. Their place is way up north, like really north. Not just small-town Minnesota, but the kind of north where the roads stop getting plowed halfway through a storm, and your closest neighbor is just trees and whatever's moving through them. The house is nice, modern, but kind of isolated. End of a long gravel road, surrounded by woods, no one around for miles. In daylight, it's peaceful, quiet. At night, though, especially in a storm, it feels like the whole world has been erased. By 9, the wind had picked up hard. It was throwing snow against the windows like someone hurling sand at them. The living room lights flickered once or twice, just enough to make me glance at the ceiling. I was camped out on the couch in my hoodie and sweats, half watching an old movie I didn't care about, half dozing off under a blanket. Then I heard it. 3 knocks. Not loud, just sharp, fast, like knuckles rapping against wood front door. At first, I wasn't even sure I'd heard it. I sat up, stared at the TV. The emergency crawl was still rolling across the bottom. Do not derive. Stay in, doors. Exactly what you'd expect in a whiteout. So who the hell would be out there knocking? I waited. Nothing. Got up slowly, went to the door, looked through the peephole. Nothing but wind and snow. Still, I opened the door a crack. Cold slapped me in the face. Porch light barely cut through the storm, just enough to light the steps and a bit of railing. I leaned out, checked both sides, even took a step onto the mat to glance toward the garage. Nothing, no footprints, no tire marks, just swirling snow and a lot of wind. I shut the door, locked it, stood there for a few seconds, hand still on the knob. Then I heard it again. 3 knocks, same rhythm. But now it was coming from the back of the house. I felt this weird drop in my chest, like missing a stair. It didn't make sense. I walked back through the house, past the dining table, down the narrow hall toward the mudroom. The glass door that led out to the backyard was frosted over, blurring everything beyond it. The outside light clicked on automatically as I got close, flooding the yard in a pale yellow glow. I squinted through the frost. Nothing. Just the snow piling up and the outline of the shed, already half buried. I opened the door a few inches and yelled, "Hello?" No answer. I listened, waited. Still nothing. It was dead silent, aside from the wind, which somehow made the silence worse. I closed the door, relocked it, and started back toward the living room. Made it maybe 10 feet. Another knock. 3 precise taps. Not on the doors this time, on the window above the kitchen sink. I stopped. That window's high. Too high for anyone to reach without a ladder or something to stand on. Even I can barely touch the bottom edge, and I'm not short. And there's nothing under it. No deck, no stairs. Just a clean drop down to the yard. I turned off the kitchen light. Didn't want to make myself a silhouette. Then I stood off to the side, holding my breath, just watching the window from the edge of the frame. Nothing moved. No knock, no shadow, no flicker of motion behind the glass. I stayed there for another minute, maybe longer, then slowly turned to head back. Right then, 3 more knocks, not from the kitchen. Dining room window, directly behind me. Same rhythm, same spacing. Tap, 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 tap. I backed away without turning around, heart hammering way too fast. I didn't even think to grab anything. I just kept walking backward until I reached the hallway. This time I didn't bother with the lights. I turned on my phone's flashlight and went room by room, checking every door, every window, every possible way in. I even checked the attic hatch, like a complete idiot, because I couldn't stop my brain from going there. Outside, nothing. No prints. No signs of anyone walking through the yard. Not even marks in the snow under the windows. Everything looked exactly the way it should. Eventually, the knocking just stopped. For almost an hour, it was dead quiet again. I tried to settle down, told myself it was probably something with the wind, maybe ice shifting or branches. I even turned the movie back on, tried to act normal. Didn't really work. It was after midnight when I went to the bathroom. Just a quick rinse, brush my teeth, check my face before bed. The light flickered a bit when I turned it on, probably the storm again. I opened the medicine cabinet to grab my toothbrush. That's when I saw it. A piece of yellow paper stuck right on the inside of the mirror. Black ink, slanted handwriting, just 5 words. "Why didn't you help me?" I didn't move. My toothbrush stayed in my hand, halfway to the sink. I'd opened that mirror a dozen times over the last few days. Cleaned it, even. Nothing had been there. And my cousin? He's not the type to leave creepy notes taped to things. His wife wouldn't either. It wasn't their handwriting. And it looked fresh, like someone had just stuck it there. The ink didn't even look faded. I shut the mirror slowly, stepped backward into the hall, closed the bathroom door, and leaned against the wall. Then the knock came again, right across from me on the small hallway window, just above the baseboard heater. Same sound. Tap, 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 tap. I didn't go to it, and I turned off my flashlight and stood completely still, pressed against the wall. Then it came again. Tap, 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 tap. Same timing, same pressure, like it was on a loop. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran upstairs, shoved the quilt chest in front of the bedroom door, not that it would stop much, and sat down in the farthest corner of the room with my flashlight and phone. Still no service. I didn't even bother trying to call anyone. I just sat there, wide awake, waiting for it to stop. By morning, it had. When I crept downstairs, the windows were quiet. The door was untouched. The note in the bathroom was gone. No footprints, no messages, just cold silence. But when I opened the front door, there was something taped to the outside of the storm glass. Same yellow paper, same handwriting. You heard me, that was it. I didn't even wait for the roads to be fully cleared. As soon as I could drive out, I left the house keys in their mailbox, got in my car, and drove straight back to my apartment 4 hours south without stopping. School let out early because of this sudden snowstorm that came out of nowhere. Classic northern New Hampshire weather, just dumping on us without warning. The buses had already gone, so anyone still hanging around had to call for a ride. My dad couldn't make it. He was stuck at the paper mill and said the side roads were iced over bad. I was trying to figure out what to do when Lennox came over and said his cousin could take us both home if I didn't mind waiting a bit. Lennox was one of those kids who was just always on. Loud, funny, knew how to push things right to the edge without getting in trouble. You either thought he was hilarious or exhausting, sometimes both. He lived maybe 10 minutes from the school, down this narrow road that ran along the edge of a state forest. I figured it was better than sitting in the office until dark. His cousin pulled up in this beat-up red sedan and barely said a word the entire ride. Just nodded when I got in and kept his eyes on the road like he was driving through a minefield. Lennox filled the sounds with non-stop trash talk, mostly aimed at me, calling me soft for wearing gloves, joking that I'd melt in the snow like some suburban marshmallow. He cracked himself up the whole way. When we got to his place, the cousin dropped us off without even cutting the engine. The house sat at the end of a gravel drive that clearly hadn't seen a plow, surrounded by woods on 3 sides, and honestly, it looked like no one had touched the exterior since about 1987. Peeling paint, sun-faded wind chimes, a porch with one step that dipped when you stepped on it. Inside, though, it was warm. Warmer than I expected. Lennox's mom worked nights at a warehouse, he said. Sometimes just crashed there if the shift went long. His little brother was around, but mostly stayed in his room, glued to his PS2. I remember noticing how still the house felt. Not cozy still, just this odd kind of waiting, like the air didn't move unless you made it. We hung out in the living room for a while. Lennox kept flipping the lights off whenever the wind shook the windows, thinking it was hilarious to jump scare me. I acted like it didn't bother me, but I was hyper aware of every little creak. At one point, the power actually flickered out for maybe 5 seconds. He just smirked and said, "Lines out here suck. Happens all the time." Then he leaned in like he was about to tell me a secret and said, "Want to see something messed up?" I didn't answer right away, but he took that as a yes. We went out the back door. No boots, no gloves. He just stepped out into the snow like it was nothing. I hesitated, my sneakers were already soaked from earlier, but I followed him. The snow had climbed up past my shins by then, powdery but heavy underneath. He led us into the woods behind the house, feet crunching through the crust, until we got to this rusted old shed that looked like it had started sinking into the ground. He popped the latch, like he'd done it 100 times, and opened the door wide. Inside it smelled like wet rust and old dirt. There was a little space heater, some busted tools, and a tarp draped over something long and low to the ground. He didn't say anything, just looked back at me, then yanked the tarp off with both hands. Underneath was a pile of dead squirrels. I'm not talking about a couple. I mean at least 2 dozen, maybe more. Some were stiff as boards, others still looked fresh. Their little bodies were tangled together, half covered in blown-in snow. It took me a second to understand what I was looking at. I didn't even speak, I just stood there. Lennox grinned. "Neighbors got traps out back. Been stealing them for weeks," he said, like it was a game. "They freeze on their own, no cleanup. Kinda genius, right?" I didn't answer. I think I just nodded, which now feels worse than saying anything. Then he pointed to this red plastic sled leaned against the wall and said, "Simon, I'll show you the fun part." We dragged it to the slope behind his backyard. Everything felt weirdly muffled, the kind of quiet you only get when snow covers every surface. He climbed in and shoved off like he was aiming for something. Instead of sliding straight down, he veered toward this shallow trench that used to be a creek bed. The sled hit something under the snow and bounced. He went flying, landed hard on his side, then sat up laughing. By the time I caught up, he was already digging into the snow. His hands were red and raw. He pulled out what looked like a frozen raccoon, stiff and half-buried. Its mouth was open, teeth showing. "Target practice," he said, like he was inviting me to play darts. He stood it upright, walked 10 paces back, picked up a rock, and chucked it. Nailed the thing right in the face. It flopped over, and he howled, laughing. Then he did it again with some other animal, gray and frozen, maybe a possum. I couldn't even tell. One after another, he set them up and knocked them down like twisted carnival prizes. His laugh kept getting louder, sharper, almost like he wasn't even trying to be funny anymore. I just stood there. Eventually, he looked at me and frowned. "Why, you look like you're gonna cry." I didn't know what to say. That's when he said, "Want to see the big one?" I told him it was freezing, that we should go back. He ignored me. He grabbed my arm and pulled me deeper into the trees, toward this part of the woods where everything felt tighter and darker, even with the snow. My fingers were burning from the cold. I didn't fight him. I don't know why, I just didn't. We reached this old tree, big enough to split at the base where the trunk had rotted. He got on his knees and started clearing snow from the hollow, fast and practiced, like he'd done it more than once. After maybe a minute, he stopped, looked over his shoulder and said, "You'll never forget this." He opened the trash bag like he was unveiling something important. Inside was a deer head. It didn't look rotten, but it wasn't fresh either. It had this stiff, gray look like it had been frozen in time. The cut was rough, not like it was done cleanly. Just pulled apart. The eyes were still in. The snow around it had melted just enough to give it this strange, almost perfect outline. That's when something clicked in my head. I told him I had to pee and started walking back toward the house. I didn't run, not yet. I waited until I couldn't hear him moving behind me. Then I bolted. By the time I got to the back door, my hands were shaking so hard I couldn't undo the latch. I managed to get inside, boots still on. His little brother was lying on the carpet watching cartoons with the volume cranked. I told him I felt sick and needed to call my dad. The landline was in the kitchen. I left a message. Then I sat there at the table, still wearing my coat, staring at the floor until my dad finally pulled up over an hour later. Lennox waved at me from the porch. His hands were raw and red. I didn't ask if it was from the cold. We never talked about that day again. That spring, we ended up in different classes. By 8th grade, we barely said hi in the halls. I don't know where he is now. That morning started like any other until my sister called. She said Mom was back in the hospital. I wrapped up what I could at work and left a little after 4. Tossed an overnight bag in the back seat, just a change of clothes, a phone charger, a toothbrush. You pack light when you don't want to admit it might be serious. The drive to my sister's place in Binghamton is about 3 hours, give or take. I figured I'd be there before 8 if the road stayed clear. They didn't. The first hour was fine, just the usual light flakes, nothing I hadn't driven through 100 times. I passed the second toll and the snow started thickening. At first, it was like driving through a snow globe, peaceful, even kind of pretty. But once I got past Oneonta, things shifted fast. The road disappeared under a smooth layer of snow. The shoulders blurred out. No more lane lines, just a blank canvas. I should have pulled off. I knew that. I told myself I'd stop at the next town, maybe grab a coffee, check the forecast, wait it out if it looked bad. But then again, I was just an hour out. I didn't want to overreact. If Mom was fine, I didn't want to show up late and flustered like something awful had already happened, so I kept going. Around 6, the gas light came on. I wasn't empty yet, but in that kind of weather, close feels like empty. A green exit sign glowed ahead through the snow. Stone Ridge, food, gas, lodging. I didn't recognize the name, but I wasn't in the mood to gamble on running another 15 miles. I took the exit. The ramp led to a narrow, winding road sloping downhill into what I assumed was the town. But if anyone had been through recently, there wasn't much sign of it. No tire tracks, no shoveled sidewalks. Just deep snow and tall trees pushing close to the edge of the road, like they were trying to reclaim it. Half a mile in, I spotted lights. A small gas station and a low diner side by side, both glowing warm and yellow in the storm. The gas station had 2 pumps and a flickering overhead light. A faded red sedan sat alone near the edge of the lot, looked abandoned, honestly. I filled up fast. My gloves were soaked by the time I finished. I could barely feel the nozzle in my hand, but I still double-checked the cap before heading to the diner. Some part of me already felt like I was being watched, though I chalked it up to the cold and the quiet. The diner was plain, one of those old-school highway spots, with fogged-up windows and a buzzing neon open sign. No other cars in the lot. I noticed that, even though I didn't let it register fully yet. Inside, it was warm, but eerily still. No music, no kitchen clatter, not even a conversation happening in the back. Just the low hum of fluorescent lights and the faint tick of a wall clock that looked about 20 years behind on style. The woman behind the counter turned when the bell on the door chimed. She looked tired, late 50s maybe, short gray hair, wearing a faded blue apron with a name stitched on it. Delia, I think. Evening, she said like we already knew each other. Rough night. I nodded. Yeah, on my way to Binghamton. Just figured I'd wait out the worst of it. She slid me a laminated menu without saying anything else. I sat at the counter, picked the stool farthest from the windows. There was a weird stillness about the place. The kind where even shifting in your seat feels too loud. A man came through from the back, bald, heavy-set, apron tied tight like he meant business. He glanced at me, didn't speak, and disappeared through a door marked "Employees Only." I waited for the usual sounds, clanking pans, something sizzling, even a faucet, but nothing followed. I ordered soup and coffee. Delia gave a nod, didn't write it down, and walked off. That's when I saw him. Across the street, under a broken streetlight, a man was standing completely still. Long brown coat buttoned to the neck. No hat, no gloves, just standing there, facing the diner. I couldn't see his face clearly. He didn't shift or shiver. Didn't even seem to blink. I looked away, counted the sugar packets, tried not to be obvious about it. When I glanced back, he was gone. Just gone. No movement, no footprints, nothing. Delia brought out the soup. It was lukewarm and smelled faintly metallic. I forced it down, one spoonful at a time. Suddenly I just wanted to leave. The kind of anxiety that doesn't shout, it just pulses quietly under your ribs. I left cash on the counter and didn't ask for change. Outside, the snow was coming down heavier than before. The red sedan by the gas station was gone. My car sat alone in the diner lot. I jogged across the snow, boots crunching hard underfoot, reached into my pocket for my keys, then stopped. The driver's door was cracked open, just an inch. I locked my car automatically, every time, even if I'm only stepping away for 2 minutes. I stood there for a long second, listening. Nothing but the wind, no voices, no engine sounds, no crunch of footsteps but mine. I pulled the door open. The dome light flickered on. Nothing inside. No signs of a break-in. No frost on the seats, no footprints, no damage. Just that weird, bone-deep feeling that something had been moved and then put back exactly where it was. I got in, locked the doors, locked them again just to be sure. The GPS rerouted me down local roads. Said it was faster than looping back to the highway. I didn't question it, just wanted to get out of there. The roads twisted through woods that felt too close. No houses, no lights, just the crunch of tires over snow and the occasional dip in the trees where my headlights hid shadows that looked almost like people. 10 minutes in, the GPS spoke. Turn right on Hickory Hollow Road. There was no road, just a thin opening between trees, packed with snow, not wide enough for more than a single vehicle. No sign, no tracks. I hesitated, but the GPS insisted. The blue arrow blinked. I turned. It was rough going. Branches scraped the roof. The snow was deeper here, untouched. I crept forward, watching every inch of the path, trying to ignore how tight my chest felt. Then, up ahead, a shape. A man, standing in the road. Same brown coat, same stillness. I stopped, maybe 10 feet from him. Hit the horn. Nothing. I shifted into reverse. The tires spun. I looked down at my phone. No signal. Looked up again. He was closer, not walking, just closer. I locked the doors again, even though I hadn't unlocked them. My fingers were shaking. I could barely breathe. Then, light behind me. Bright high beams flooding the path. A truck. Relief hit me so hard I almost cried. I looked forward again. I drove ahead, slow and careful. The truck didn't follow. When I glanced back, no lights, no vehicle, no tire tracks. I don't remember the rest. I just kept driving until I saw signs for the highway again, like surfacing from a dream you don't want to admit you had. When I got to the hospital, I couldn't speak. My sister asked what happened. I told her it was just the snow. 2 days later, I tried to find Stone Ridge again. Nothing on any map. It was like that whole town never existed. Since then, I don't drive in winter. Doesn't matter how urgent it is.